Ahoy! With the New World Aeternum playtest on consoles currently happening, we have some information about various aspects of that as well as some info about changes. Not breaking any NDA here, I'm not even under any NDA, but nothing that would get me in trouble in any way, but I can still talk about some things. First of all, one thing that you'll notice here is a repost from New World Aeternum, specifically from Razer. So after the playtest had already been going on for a while, New World Aeternum retweeted this with another way to get codes for the console, essentially. This, to me, was an indication that things are not going well. Why would they specifically push these codes out later after they already pushed them out with other platforms, with other websites, and advertise them through the official Twitter account if they didn't have enough players? So here's another way they're trying to push more people into the playtest. So the whole theory of the whole playtest being delayed potentially because they didn't have enough players becomes more plausible. And we can also see on New World Database that we have the actual player count here now, and this includes the beta. You can see that at this time it's relatively low, but that also makes sense because it's neither EU nor US peak time. But even if we look at US peak time, we're seeing around 600-ish players playing, whereas the EU beta is like 270, I think, maybe the peak. Not very high, 298 there, especially if we compare this to the early playtest. I'm not even sure if back then, before New World was officially released, we already had this tracking on New World Database, but what I know is that the servers were incredibly packed, so they were very likely significantly above this number. So yeah, it definitely seems like they are not getting that many players. They got some more in the first couple of days, of course, but realistically, for something that they expected to have a lot of hype, I would say this is not something that they've achieved here. But that's also not entirely surprising. If you look at this Reddit post from Zata, then we can see that there are a variety of EU countries that are simply excluded from the playtests, like Denmark, Netherlands, Sweden, and so on, that don't seem to be able to access the game. That could at least partially explain why the EU numbers are lower, because generally EU player population in New World is fairly high compared to the American population, so it would seem odd that the player count is so much lower, though it is also worth keeping in mind that some people will play on the NA servers anyways. I think some players may default to that, especially from other regions around the world, and also some players may want to play with other people with a larger group, and they may go on NA for that. Now, the playtest doesn't have all the content from New World Aeternum. For example, you can't access the Hive of the Gorgons raid. So there are things that haven't been seen yet, that haven't been accessed yet. You can't do many of the expeditions. Like, a lot of existing content is not possible to do either. However, what you can do is the new free-for-all PvP zone. They had a day where you specifically could create higher level characters, and the various different aspects of the game were tested, like the OPR test, they had the free-for-all PvP and so on. And we've got a little bit of experience from that, I guess. So far, it seemed like there were no mechanics included that directly discouraged grouping, but also with how the reward system seems to be working, there doesn't seem to be much benefit in grouping other than you wanting to grieve people, of course, which I absolutely expect to be the case, but this is not something that I can 100% confirm. This is just third-hand information, really. The new zone was also leaked, or the new area rather, that is in Cutlass Keys. It is approximately half the size of Cutlass Keys, a bit smaller than that maybe. I cannot show you the screenshots here because I don't want to get in trouble, but it is there, and it seems to have multiple entrances as well. So there seem to be ways in which you can get to safety and not just a single spot to get out, to secure your loot. And what we know so far is that there are various rewards that you can get in return for the doubloons that you get there, and 2 of those are new artifacts. Again, I'm not going to get myself in trouble here. I'm not going to show you the artifacts or show you all the details about the artifacts yet. I'll just give you a basic idea. One of them is basically a recovery type of deal where if you drop on a certain health threshold, you get a lot of things back at once. That's a heavy chest piece, so that can be used for survivability primarily. And the other one is a medium glove that allows you to dispel empowers from enemies and steal them and give some degree of empower to yourself in return. I think concept-wise, especially the medium glove sounds pretty interesting. I like the way that is laid out. I am kind of concerned a bit that as a medium glove, this could be very potent in light builds that are just using a medium glove in order to steal empowers from range. But we'll have to see how that plays out. Particularly looking at something that doesn't have all too much self-empowers here, like musket, for example, where you would benefit from it a lot and you can snipe it from range. So yeah, going to be interesting how that will be utilized, how balanced that will be. But this is also an early test phase, so who knows what happens by the end of that. The early game experience in general seems to still be fairly rough. There seem to be quite a few complaints about that, but that seemed to be complaints similar to what we saw in Baggins' gameplay upload, or I think Cat Conti had it as well, but like a cut version of that, where they had that early access gameplay where they could see how things kind of go, and just, certain things were very jittery still, and the face animations, especially of the NPCs and the new dialogues, were just very janky. So that kind of stuff is apparently still very much in this playtest, but we also don't really know how further along the release version is compared to that playtest. I would imagine there have been a few changes since then, considering that's usually the case for PTR versions as well. So I don't think that's something to think about too deeply. What I think is definitely a concern is that apparently the people that signed up through New World's official website got an invite with access to a Discord, so they can provide feedback there, whereas a lot of the other people that got into the playtest later through one of the various means in which you can get keys did not automatically get Discord access along with that, meaning there are a lot of people that were able to play that couldn't provide feedback through Discord, but would have to provide it through their console instead, and I cannot imagine that many people would actually type out feedback on the console, so that seems rather counterproductive for a test. But that said, we know that quite often when they do any form of tests, it's not really so much to collect a lot of feedback anyways. A lot of the feedback gets shelved, gets ignored, whatever, whereas they are mainly just looking to test if whatever they've put together is running well enough for them to continue with it, I guess, and that there are no major game-breaking bugs, which may then still appear later anyways, but as such, they may not care all that much about written feedback to begin with. Since a lot of content isn't accessible, I'm not expecting that we'll get much more info out of this playtest. We'll probably get more once there is a playtest that PC is allowed to access as well. If you want to hear more about that, or about Throne of Liberty, or other games we'll talk about in the next days, consider subscribing and clicking the bell. Thanks to all of my patrons for supporting my videos further. If you'd like to do the same, feel free to join me there. And thank you for watching. Duke Sloth, out.